What's up, Z Army? The 90s were an epic period in gaming history. It was the decade of Super Mario World, Mortal Kombat, and Resident Evil. But this list isn't about fun, it's about pain. Franchises were besmirched, and consoles flopped because of the games on this list. Today's video is brought to you by NordVPN. Use the link in the description and save 75% on a 3-year plan. Switch to NordVPN to protect yourself today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Here's our top 10 worst games of the 90s. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties make some promises on the box. Pandas, race cars, and shower scenes. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties was advertised as a full-motion video game on the 3DO. But to be honest, it's more of a slideshow than full motion. And it's barely a game, since the player can't make much of a difference in the outcome of the plot. Gameplay consists of making the right choices during the slideshow, but if you made the wrong choices, the developer decided that you'd have to start the game all over again until you made the right ones. The only appeal of this game in the end was the slapstick racy tone, and that's not enough to make an engaging game. Sex sells, but bad games don't. Mario games are like pizza. Even when it's bad, it's still good. But not on the Philips CDI. This infamous console has corrupted more good things than crack. You probably know this game already because of the hilariously bad cutscenes. But that's not all that's disappointing about it. For a Mario game that was released on a cutting-edge console at the time, the game concept was pretty minimal. It's a puzzle game where Mario spends most of his time closing doors, and it looks suspiciously like 1983's elevator action. An interesting detail is that Hotel Mario was made by somewhat older developers and testers, but knowing that the game would be played by younger folks, the gameplay was later sped up. Early versions of the cutscenes were deemed mechanical and no fun, so the visual designers decided to use, in their own words, elements from Disney and Token. We can't remember any Disney movies that have crippled our souls, but okay then. We're not sure if there's a worse Mario game than this. If you know one, let us know in the comments. So, there's this nerd named Lester walking around on the docks, reading his comic. He decides to take a nap on a pallet, accidentally gets loaded onto a ship, which then gets hijacked, and he narrowly escapes from it as it's sinking, just to end up on an island. Sounds pretty unlikely, right? Lester the Unlikely is not a good game, but that's not only because of the gameplay. It relies on that it's so uncool it becomes cool again vibe, but never makes that switch. None of Lester's nerdy qualities ever make him useful in the game, so you're left with a character that trips and wobbles all the time and is afraid of turtles without any payoff. How unloved is Lester the Unlikely? Brian Greenstone, programmer of the game, commented once when asked about it, saying, "Lester was a game I never liked. Don't want to talk about it." At the end of the game, Lester escapes the island by surfing a giant wave that's caused by a nearby nuclear test. You can say a lot about this game, but you can't say they didn't stay loyal to the whole unlikely thing. You're a special agent that's tasked with keeping an eye on a house that's full of girls and rigged with TV cameras and traps throughout. This is gonna be classy. The girls are being threatened by vampire-like creatures augurs, and the player has to trigger traps in the house to kill the vampires and protect the girls. To do this, the player pretty much just has one button to press at the right time. And this was one of the main criticisms of the game, the monotonous gameplay. Contrary to the other interactive story on this list, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, Night Trap on Sega CD did have full motion video, which was a big deal at the time. But its technical achievement and silly sense of humor didn't protect it from the 1993 congressional hearing on video games, where some old people took games way too seriously. Despite Night Trap not showing any explicit violence, the end result was that Night Trap was removed from stores after an organized telephone campaign. And the way more violent Mortal Kombat somehow got away with it. A remaster of Night Trap was developed in 2014, and was eventually even released on Nintendo Switch. Which is ironic, since Nintendo of America declared that Night Trap would never, ever be released on Nintendo in 1993.
I'm pulling the plug on you before you do any more damage.
Action 52 includes 52 games in one cartridge. That's a game for every week of the year, is what gullible parents thought when they bought this piece of garbage for $200 in 1991. Most of the games on the cartridge were simple scrolling shooters and clunky platformers that were barely playable. However, there was a featured game called Cheetah Men. This gem was destined for greater things in Action 52. There were plans for action figures and even an animated TV series. But the only good thing about this game was the music. To add insult to injury, when developer Active Enterprises announced a competition where anyone who could complete level 5 of the game Ooze could enter a draw to win $52,000 and a scholarship of the same value, it came as no surprise that Ooze always crashed during level 3, making the competition a total joke. Shaq Fu was originally pitched as a basketball game, presumably not titled Shaq Fu. But Shaquille O'Neal was a big fan of Mortal Kombat and preferred a fighting game bearing the name. That makes as much sense as martial artist Jean-Claude Van Damme wanting a dancing game named Jean-Claude Van Dance. At the beginning of the game, Shaq is visiting Tokyo when he randomly walks into a kung fu dojo. Within minutes, the old man in the dojo convinces him to walk through a portal into a magical world to find a boy named Nezu. Next thing you know, the gentle giant is beating the tar out of a cat lady. The fighting in Shaq Fu was a clunky affair, but the graphics and sound were pretty okay for the time. What makes it such an infamously bad game is that it was more of a very mediocre game based on a terribly ridiculous idea. Even the accompanying rap album, Shaq Fu The Return, couldn't spice things up. Well, Shaq Fu you too. We're at that part of the list where it gets really sad. Here's Superman 64. We understand it's the N64, and it was early for 3D games, but the execution of this game was just too bad. Developer 90'S Interactive tried to do way too much, leading to shenanigans like kryptonite fog that was just distant fog meant to camouflage the horrendous drawing distance of the game. Animations were extremely wooden, making Superman more like Stuperman. And none of his special powers like heat vision and X-ray vision were readily available to use, only through power-ups, again making Superman less than super. The goal of the design was to make a game where the player could really behave like a superhero, but this was too much for the N64, leading to many bugs and glitches that couldn't be fixed before its release. Development of the game also suffered from constraints from Warner Bros. And DC, like the limited use of Superman's powers and the ridiculous demand that the already virtual Superman would only be fighting in an in-game virtual world, so that he couldn't fight real people in an already virtual world. Are you confused? So are we. Despite the, even at the time, horrible reviews, Superman 64 still sold over 500,000 copies. That's a lot of sad kids being handed a nice handful of Pooperman. Trespassers is a heartbreaking story about what could have been. Released in 1998 as a digital sequel to Lost World Jurassic Park, it was a very ambitious game that tried to do too much too soon. Realism in games is a nice feature, but Trespasser took it too far. The game has no interface beyond the first area, except your health level always being displayed on your boob. And almost every action is physics-based and needs to be performed with only one hand. It reminds you of Surgeon Simulator? But too difficult and unwieldy for most players. Protagonist Anna has excellent gun skills though. She knows how many rounds are in a gun just by feeling it.
15 or so.
And she can shoot a shotgun with one hand easily, like a friggin' Terminator. Low-key, this was a groundbreaking game that knew what it wanted to do and knew how to do it. This game does contain some gold, but it failed to make a fun interactive experience out of its elements. And in the end, that's the biggest shame. That and the fact that there were only 50,000 copies sold. Dumb concept, bad designs, and poor execution. Now we're cooking at the pointy end of this list. Imagine the boardroom meeting that led to Catfight. Hey, you know Mortal Kombat? Let's do exactly that, but really bad, and with way more boobs. The character designs vary, from warriors dressed as aerobic teachers to almost nude demons. And one of the warrior ladies sounds exactly like Eric Cartman. Catfight is an all-around atrocious fighting game. Unlike some of the games on this list, it didn't try to do anything new or fun. It's a shameless Mortal Kombat clone that exclusively featured barely dressed women, because the developers thought that's what teenage boys who buy video games like the most. Do you know what teenage boys like even more? Good video games. The one you knew would come. Link: The Faces of Evil is widely considered to be a black page in the book of excellent Zelda games. Developed by Philips CDI, the game's production took an unusual route for a Zelda game, completely out of Nintendo's hands. It was originally planned to appear on Nintendo's own CD game console that was to be developed with Philips. This game was scrapped, however, after Nintendo saw the negative response to Sega's Mega CD. This left Philips with a deal that included only the rights to some of the Zelda characters. What makes this game such an insult is more about the unnecessary deviation from the usual style and gameplay of Zelda games. Basically what we're saying is, this disaster could have been prevented. Believe it or not, Faces of Evil got some praise when it was released. The image and sound quality were on a new level compared to other games, and the fact that it was played from a CD made it cutting edge. Even the animations were well received at the time because of the full motion, but are now considered more cheesy than a hobo's feet. Did you know there were so many rubbish releases during one of the best decades of gaming? Did we miss any abominations from the 90s? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thanks for watching.